There are so many different directions I could go in this series, but today we're going to take a bit of a different turn and talk about something that has been a pretty popular subject in conspiracy circles over the years. And that topic is Bigfoot. That's right, I said Bigfoot. Oh wait, that's not the Bigfoot I'm talking about. This is the Bigfoot I'm talking about. Many have tried to cover this topic, but what we're going to do is something different than most people. We are going to discuss it by fitting it into the true model of our world and what we know about who, what, when, where, why, and how we came to be, with the true understanding of how our world works. Using a scientific model. What is a model, and why is it so absolutely essential to use whenever researching any subject? A scientific model represents objects, phenomena, and physical processes in a consistent and logical way. To be more specific, a scientific model is a physical and/or mathematical and/or conceptual representation of a system of ideas, events, or processes. Real scientists seek to identify and understand patterns in our world by drawing on their scientific knowledge to offer explanations that enable the patterns to be predicted. Like, for example, using a model to understand the water cycle. It's like using an equation where you know some of the variables, which enables you to calculate the answer with accuracy, assuming you have the correct model. If you have the correct model, which we do, and you understand how your world truly works, which we do, you will always be able to calculate the answer to any question by using the equation and plugging in the variables, which are the topics that we discuss. Without a correct model, all answers will be wrong. You must use a correct model when trying to answer questions, and that is exactly what we teach you all to do. So, on to the subject of Bigfoot. You may ask, why are we discussing this topic? The controllers have made it seem like a joke of a topic, frivolous to discuss at all. But isn't that by design? We're going to discuss it because it offers us clues to our true historical ancestors, shows us that there is a sure cover-up going on of hidden knowledge, and proves there are things going on today in our world that we are not told about by those in the know. In this video, I will not use any secret army documents or leaked government reports. One rule is to never use intel from anyone, no matter who it is, when researching a topic. We have no idea whether any of the supposed intel is true, and most likely, true information is never leaked. When you know someone lies about one thing, why would you believe anything they tell you ever again? Instead, we use what we know. Bigfoot, or also commonly referred to as Sasquatch, goes by many names depending upon which part of the world you are in. I'm not even going to try and pronounce this list of names, but you get the idea. And a couple additions that are not on this list are skunk ape and swamp ape. The description of Bigfoot will also vary depending upon which part of the world you are in, and that would make sense considering each part of the world has different climate challenges and terrain. Just to touch on a few examples, this is a representation of the Yowie, the Australian Bigfoot. The Yeti is the Himalayan Bigfoot. And the Yeren is China's Bigfoot. The Yeren is usually reddish in color, but occasionally albino. They are always represented as being bipedal, large, hairy hominids. They are also reported to have a strong skunk-like, extremely stinky odor. Sightings of creatures like this have been reported all over the world, even from Brian himself back in 2008 in Oregon. There have been artistic depictions of this type of creature all over the world throughout history in many cultures. Since they are so seldom seen, they avoid civilization and humans, which is why they are not commonly witnessed, meaning they must have intelligence to know to stay away from people. And lastly, what we can know. As with most subjects they want people to stay away from, the topic of Bigfoot has been made a mockery by the controllers through the power in their use of television, news media, and film to control the narrative and discourage people from honestly seeking answers, just like they have done with every other deception. As I said, many cultures throughout history have depictions and stories of a Bigfoot-like creature. Most native cultures tell stories about tall, hairy men in the woods and mountains. There's also a huge amount of native art that clearly depicts these imposing, ape-like beings. One of countless examples is the Hoopa Indian Reservation in Northern California, which is a culture strongly intertwined with the presence of Sasquatch, or Oma as they call it. Their art depicts Oma, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch right alongside other real-life documented animals. They are presented along coyote, bear, squirrel, owl, or any other creature you could throw a stick at in the woods. In the controller's model, they call this giant bipedal monkey man Gigantopithecus. A record of his existence even exists in the official establishment's fossil records. So they do admit that something like this existed. Only, they say he existed something like 3 million years ago and as a result of evolution, and their depiction cannot be relied on as accurate. There have been many people who have claimed to capture real footage of a Bigfoot-like creature over the years. I'm not saying that all footage is authentic or have actually captured a Bigfoot, but I know that there is one that deserves to be looked into. So let's delve into probably the most famous and convincing video footage of what is believed to be Bigfoot from the Patterson-Gimlin film, also known as the Patterson film or the PGF. It is an American short motion picture of an unidentified subject which the filmmakers have said was a Bigfoot. The footage was shot in 1967 in Northern California. The filmmakers were Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin. Patterson died of cancer in 1972 and, quote, maintained right to the end that the creature on the film was real. So we're going to take a look at this footage now, and then I'm going to go back and break it down. And just to note about this footage, it was originally taken on horseback, so the original video is very shaky. This specific video version that we're watching now has been stabilized with some parts zoomed in and slowed down. The first point I'm going to make is, if this video were a hoax with a person in a costume, for 1967, that's a pretty amazing job. Let's take a look at some examples of people in ape costumes, just for comparison. First, we're going to take a look at the example of the 1976 King Kong movie. And I want you to take note of how thick the costume is, the fur is, how shiny the chest is, just to give you an idea of what they could do back in 1976. And this was a huge, big budget Hollywood production. I also want you to take note of how short the arms are and how carpet-like the hair looks on the body. This next example is from the 2006 movie Abominable. Now this is what they were doing in 2006, and I want you to notice the same things about this creature as I pointed out in King Kong. Now let's take another look back at this camcorder footage from years before in 1967. The next thing I want to point out is when this creature turns, you can see that it's clearly a female. She has breasts. Now, if someone were hoaxing Bigfoot, wouldn't they make a male Bigfoot, considering that's what people would think it is, instead of making a female Bigfoot with breasts? I also want to point out that if you look at the head, the back of the head is flat, just like a gorilla. Now let's look at how the head turns. So when she turns to look, she doesn't just turn her head, she turns her entire torso with her head. And that is exactly like gorillas do because their neck is so muscular. Just for perspective, this is some video footage of silverback gorillas, and you can see how they turn. They can't just turn their head. They have to turn their torso when they look. And that's exactly how this creature turns in the 1967 Patterson clip. Now let's look at the back and butt muscles. They are clearly defined through the hair, unlike what we saw in the 2006 Abominable movie and the 1976 King Kong film when someone was wearing a costume. And the back muscles also look very similar to the silverback gorilla's muscles. And while we are talking about the muscles, which is one of the most convincing arguments that this is real footage, let's watch this creature move. You can literally see the muscles moving and flexing, even though the skin is full of hair as this creature steps and walks. And watch how she moves through the rocky terrain. She moves pretty quickly, walking through the rocks and in the woods effortlessly, unlike someone would move in a gorilla costume with the obstruction of view that someone would have through a mask and the difficulty of wearing a bulky suit. The last and most convincing quality is the length of this creature's arms. Look at how long the arms are. The fingers go down to the knees. Now, in a costume, you cannot fake longer arms. For some perspective, let's take Kevin McHale, who played for the Boston Celtics and was known for having some of the longest arms seen on a human man. Look at how far his arms and fingers reach. They maybe make it to midway down his quads. So I've taken a freeze frame from the Patterson video, and you can see that the fingertips reach the bend of the knee. Now, for another example, let's take Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in Star Wars. Not only for an example of how tough it was for him to move in a costume like that, and how slowly he actually did move when he had the suit on, but mainly for the length of arms. Here is a photo of him standing next to Harrison Ford. And just so you know, Peter Mayhew had what is referred to as Marfan's syndrome, which is a syndrome that can affect the skeleton, leading to a very thin body with long arms, legs, fingers, and toes. At his peak height, he was 7 feet 3 inches tall. And look at how far his hands reach. For all of the reasons I have just pointed out, talking only about this specific footage, I would lean heavily towards this being real authentic footage of a large, hairy, bipedal monkey man. Brian and I have touched on the colonization of our plane in our work. Every new world must be terraformed to create the environment needed for the life forms that will be occupying it, and colonized to create systems needed to support civilization. What you must understand about colonization is that it has to happen in stages. So let's talk about pre-civilization. Pathfinders or pioneers. The first phase of any colonization, you send your pathfinders. Pathfinders are the first to arrive on the scene, a type of man that can survive in the harsh environment of the world without any civilization yet. Your pathfinders or pioneers are your hunter-gatherer types that can survive by foraging off the land. When the first phase is complete, you bring in a different type of man to perform the next crucial functions. The next phase of colonization is to send in the military type to secure the area and set up to protect the future settlers that would be coming. Next, the settlers come, and eventually you build your civilization. The difference is that we aren't talking about a part of the known world being colonized. We are talking about the initial colonization of an entirely new world and masters who have technology and human engineering at their disposal. So where did these beings come from? What are they, and why are they here? The masters have created many versions of man to be the slave labor for work they cannot or will not physically do since the beginning of life on this plane. The type of man they engineer depends upon the type of job they need done. In colonization of a plane that consists of a very harsh environment that has not been yet terraformed, the pathfinders or pioneers would need to be intelligent, bipedal, with opposing thumbs to use tools, strong in stature to do physical labor, and given a thick coat of hair to keep them warm and protect them from the elements. The description of Bigfoot and similar creatures fits the exact type of description of what would be needed. Why not just use man as we know him today? Because you always use the type of worker that is best suited for the environment. An example is sled dogs in Alaska. To pull a sled in Alaska, you don't use a dog like a poodle with a thick coat but can't pull weight, or a strong, short-haired dog breed that can't keep warm. They use Alaskan or Siberian Huskies that both can pull weight and can keep warm. There have been many versions of humanoids over time, and this type of man would be one of the originals. But for the masters, it is a delicate balance between giving man the qualities needed for the job and keeping them under control. The masters control their property, and intelligent bipedal creatures that can live out in the wild independently from civilization by foraging off the land are tough to control. They only are able to keep control by creating versions of man that are dependent on what the master's society provides, like today's version of man without the physical attributes to allow him to live out in the wild. This fact is probably one of the most significant factors that tells us that we were purposefully engineered to be dependent on the master's civilization for purposes of control. We are the only mammal that exists that was not given an outer layer of either thick skin with blubber or a layer of hair or fur over the entire body to allow us to live in the elements, to insulate us from either cold or hot temperatures, like all other mammals. Wolves and tigers have hair over the majority of their body. A walrus has thick skin with blubber. Even most domesticated mammals have hair or fur. Today's version of man cannot survive out in the elements without clothing or shelter to keep them warm and protect them from the sun. Compared to other mammals, our outer layer of skin is thin and delicate and is easily susceptible to damage. This makes it very challenging to survive out in the wild just with what we were naturally given, without the things we use now from civilization to assist us. Because of our inability to live with what we were naturally given, we are binded to the slavery system of civilization. But they needed this original version of man to provide these initial functions. And when the job for this breed of man created becomes obsolete, they dispose of them. Don't think that's what they would do? We have historical evidence that shows us it's exactly what they do with their property that they don't need anymore. For example, after World War I, did you know that when they didn't have any need for all of their horses anymore, they took hundreds of thousands of horses out into fields and shot them all? But when eliminating an obsolete, intelligent bipedal creature, this can be a difficult task to complete entirely, as entire extermination of any breed is a very tough job, and there are some that are always clever enough to avoid being found. The masters and controllers keep everything about our true history hidden to keep people in the dark for reasons of control. Every belief they push is to support their BS model and fake history. If people knew that these beings once existed and still exist, and not 3 million years ago, but recently, they could not keep people believing in evolution over millions of years. If the population knew these beings exist today, they would ask questions as to where they came from. Another main reason they deny the existence of other intelligent bipedal beings is because we have been told we are the only bipedal mammals that exist. And that's what sets us apart from all the other mammals and makes us special. We are told from both science and religion that we are either the pinnacle of God's creation or of evolution. They don't care which one you believe in because they both support the same ultimate lie. If people knew we weren't the first or the only intelligent bipedal beings, we wouldn't seem that special, would we? They teach that bipedalism is what separates us from the other animals. That bipedalism leads to freeing up of the hands, which leads to use of tools, which leads to a larger brain capacity. So if people knew we weren't the only bipedals, they would also know we aren't the only intelligent ones that live on this plane, and the masters can't have that. very existence of this version of man is a threat to the controllers. Not only are they evidence of a hidden history, human engineering, and the real model of our world, but they are uncontrollable without need for shelter and civilization. This means that it stands to reason that naturally the masters, by use of the top-level controllers, would be trying to exterminate these creatures. Most likely this effort is still going on today. There are many places to hide in this huge plain, and these intelligent humanoids know to avoid humans at all cost. Any humans, especially when you are being eradicated. The reasons they are not commonly seen or documented may be that there aren't many left, and they would clearly know to stay hidden. When something that can live in the harshest of terrains, out in the wild, independent from society, and their biggest goal is to hide from all humans, you aren't going to just see them walking down every street corner. So are these types of monkey men real or just a myth? When the controllers use the full power of media to take over the narrative on subjects like this, you know they have something to hide. And if there's one thing I've learned, when someone lies to you about one thing, why would I ever believe anything that they tell me again? Are there secret missions going on to hunt and kill these beings? We can only logically assume that since these creatures seem to still exist, that there has been a secret effort to dispose of them. Eradication would be carried out by black operations. Just as a review, a black operation or black op is a covert or clandestine operation by a government agency, a military unit, or a paramilitary organization. It can include activities by private companies or groups. Key features of a black operation are that it is secret and it is not attributable to the organization carrying it out. Secret means secret. That means nothing from black operations is ever released to the public, ever. Remember that when hearing about supposed leaked documents. If there is one thing the controllers know how to do, it's keep a secret. Something that the bottom-level slaves can't seem to accomplish at all. The truth about Bigfoot has been kept a secret too. It shouldn't be a surprise when learning the truth about your world. Hasn't everything of value been kept a secret? The key to getting the answers is not by making wild assumptions because anything could be possible, but to ground your conclusions solidly in fact, evidence, and logic. And the most important concept to understand is why all the secrecy. And Brian and I together have exposed more of the real truth like no one else ever has. Everybody stay safe, be good to one another, and God bless.